When we were really little kids, we lived in California and Dad drove a truck for Hobbs Parson, delivering produce up and down the Central Valley of California. And that produce had to be delivered before dawn to the grocery stores. So the summer that I was 6, it was finally my turn to ride on the truck with my dad. So my mom woke me up in the wee hours of the morning and curled my hair and put on my best dress. And away I went to work with my dad. I remember sitting in the truck and watching him load all the produce into the truck, and then as we went to each individual grocery store, sitting there while he unloaded their shipment onto the dock. I also remember being able to pull the air horn whenever we were on the open road. We had to be on the open road because it was still dark and people were sleeping. But the best memory of that entire day was the cantaloupe. Dad carried this big, long, thin, pearl-handled knife in his pocket all the time. Rod and Sue, you'll remember that. And he cut that cantaloupe in half and presented me with an entire half of a cantaloupe. Now, in our family, with as many kids as there were, nobody got an entire half of anything. So that was just a really special gift that he gave me. And for that one day, I felt like I was my father's entire world, and he was mine.
Stories, there's many of them. But one of them was when we were young and Sandy and I were like first married. We went up to Payson and went camping with Jack and Fern. And I had a motorcycle and we were riding it up one of the roads up to the rim, and one of the cylinders went out. So Sandy got in the vehicle behind with Jack and Fern, and I took and rode the motorcycle back down to the campground. I didn't have a helmet on, and a cop passed me as I was approaching the campground, and I turned in real quick, hit some dirt, spun out, and I ripped the whole butt out of my pants, and Jack and Fern watched me running the bike back into the campground and hiding it. The officer came and found me, and then Jack went in to the judge in town while I had to go back to work, and he got my case dismissed. Isn't that a great father-in-law story? Jack was my father-in-law, but more than that, he was my friend. Jack had the gift of helps. He helped a lot of people, and his hand is on everything that I have, and he will be missed.
One memory of Dad. I don't have just one memory of Dad. It's like my brain is on fast forward. I have so many memories going through my head that I can't focus on just one. Camping, fishing, road trips. One time Robert and I were stuck in Yuma. We'd blown the radiator on our car, and we were out of money because we were young and we were newly married, so Mom and Dad wired us some money, and we went into town. We hitchhiked into town and bought a radiator for our car and got a ride back to our car with a Bible salesman named Eugene. When we got back to our car, the radiator, which was used when we bought it, had holes in it, and water was everywhere. We finally made it back into town, and we called Mom and Dad, and they jumped in their van and they packed up their ice chest with food and drinks, and they drove all the way down to Yuma to get us. And Dad pulled that radiator out and he took it back to the shop that we bought it from, and he gave those guys what for selling me a bad radiator. And that was just Dad. It didn't matter what was happening. It didn't matter. If one of us needed him, he was there. It didn't matter how far he had to go. It didn't matter what he had to do. He was just always there. I love you, Dad, and I'm gonna miss you.
And my memory of Jack is family, and it's always been family. He's the patriarch of this family. And my memory of him is when I first met him and asked him if I could marry his daughter Susan. And he asked me, "Are you sure you know what you're getting into?" And I'm here over 30 years later. I think I know what I was getting into. A great family. Thanks, Jack. I love you.
The summer I turned 18, I was a bit of a difficult person, and Grandma and Grandpa took me to the rim for a week of camping. They brought my best friend along to disguise the intervention, and the entire week was long, slow fishing trips up the river. A lot of learning at his knee about listening to the Lord, being patient, being quiet. These are things that I have always dealt with and probably will for a long time. But I remember one day we went back to camp, and Grandma, for whatever reason, decided she had to learn how to do the Macarena. So my friend and I worked with her for about an hour on a little grass patch in front of their motorhome. And after an hour, Grandpa had picked it up beautifully. Grandma was struggling a little bit. It was pretty cute. It was funny. We laughed, we giggled. It was probably one of my best memories I've ever had of Grandma and Grandpa. And she was so frustrated, and she looked at him and she said, "Well, Jack?" And he grabbed her up in his arms and did this little two-step shuffle with her around the grass and said, "This is how I like to dance with my gal." And it was so cute. That's how I'll always remember him. He was the long thinker, the slow talker. He was funny and happy and sweet. His family always came first. He could always laugh and tell a joke. There was always so much to him. And for that, I thank you forever, Grandpa, and I will do my very best to pass that on in my little family. I love you.
Hey everyone, sorry I couldn't make it there, but duty calls. What to say? One thing that really sticks out to me about Jack was when I first came into the family and married in, I had mentioned just in passing that I had no grandparents. They had passed years before, and without hesitation, Jack took me under his wing, became a grandfather that I didn't have, made me part of the family, did things with us like took me camping and fishing and things like that I had never grown up doing, and because of that, I really enjoyed it and have tried to pass that on to my son. So I think there's a legacy there that I want to thank him for. And so thank you, Jack, for all you've done. Thank you for loving me like one of your own, and you will be missed.
There are two things that stand out the most to me about Grandpa when I think about his memory. The first one, his love of sugar, sweets, and he knew how to make the journey in life the most important part, not just the rushing to the destination. For example, my favorite story and one of my favorite childhood memories is whenever we would be driving to go camping, the very first time we really went camping together and we were old enough to do this, my grandpa would be driving and then all of a sudden the car would start to shake and the brakes were going off and on, and he would look at my grandma would look at him and go, "Well, Jack, what's wrong?" And then he would pull off into a parking lot and tell us girls and my dad and mom to go into the store and just sit and relax, and then we would come back out and the car would be magically fixed, and of course it was Dairy Queen. So we came out with all these blizzards and treats, and my grandma would hand him his treat. We'd get back in the car and then we'd go on camping. So the first time that happened, we didn't think anything of it. The second time, it was kind of like the same thing happened again, didn't really catch on. By the third time, we would pull up towards the Dairy Queen around that road, and all three of us girls would start going, "Car trouble at Dairy Queen, car trouble at Dairy Queen," because we had caught on and we knew the game. So that's one of my favorite memories, and he loved to make things, even the most mundane, the driving, important, and make them a special fun memory. So Grandpa, I promise that I will treat Aaron to some car trouble at Dairy Queen, and I'll pass on that memory. Love you.
I met Jack officially about 10 and a half years ago at a Thanksgiving dinner we had at the White Tank Mountains when I moved home, and he instantly welcomed me. I wasn't really in the family yet, but he welcomed me as if I was, and he was always a kind man to me. I remember a couple of years ago, actually, my family and I were going through a hard time, and Jack and Fern actually brought food to us, which was incredible. We needed it so badly, and he didn't even hesitate to help us out, and he's just been a 100% awesome man to me, and my family and I really I'm gonna miss him a lot.
As far back as I can remember, I would always go and see Grandpa, and he would always have something in his cupboard, his love of sweets. He would have nutty bars, oatmeal cream pies. Sometimes in the freezer there was ice cream bars. Those were special. And I wasn't allowed to ask for anything. You know, Mom did teach us the right way. So I would go over to Grandpa after I had snooped and found out where all the good stuff was, decided what I wanted, and I would go over and I would nudge him. Hey, Grandpa, did you know that you have XYZ in the cupboard of the freezer? And he'd go, no, really? Why don't you go ask Grandma if we can have one? Either we can have our own or we'll share, just kind of depending on how many there was. And so I'd go over to Grandma. Hey, Grandma, did you know that you have this here? And she would grin and look over my head and go, really, we do? And I'd go, yeah, Grandpa and I would like one. And she would say, well, if you share. So she'd give me my treat and I'd skip over to Grandpa and I would go climb up in his lap and we'd share our treat. And that always meant so much to me because it was the little things that he made so special, and he made it just fun. And Grandpa, your sweet tooth has conveyed to all three of my children, and we will always have sweets around in memory of you, and we love you, and I will miss you always.
The thing that I remember most about Grandpa and what stood out the most for me is that there was more to him than meets the eye. I remember Becky and I had just gotten married and we were taking our first family camping trip, and he and Grandma, they came up to spend part of the day with us, and some of the guys, we were playing horseshoes when he got up there. Well, he volunteered and he wanted to play, and in my mind I'm thinking, there's this old guy who wants to play horseshoes, he can barely breathe and all that. I don't want him on my team, so I put him on my brother's team. I thought it was smart. Well, then he grabs the horseshoes and he proceeds to go double ringer on me and completely destroy me and my dad's team, and he won. So since then I realized that there was so much more than meets the eye to him. He was a loving father, a loving husband. He loved his grandkids, he loved his kids. He was just such a loving person. So there's far more to him than meets the eye, and I will always miss that about him, about the love he showed me and my family. I love you, and I'm going to miss you very much, Grandpa.
When I was about 5, my family life was pretty bad. Me and my parents were living in California. Right when things got the worst, Grandpa and Grandma showed up in their RV out of nowhere and picked us up and decided to bring us back here to Arizona. The trip was a good experience. I got to bond a lot with both of them. But my favorite memory is Grandpa and I were sitting in the front of the RV and he was teaching me how to whistle. I've whistled a lot since then, and he taught me a few songs, and every time that I'll whistle for the rest of my life, I'll always remember sitting in the front of the RV with him. He just was all about bonding with his grandkids. I'll miss him a lot.
Love you, Grandpa Jack. I love you, Grandpa Jack. I love you, Grandpa. I miss you. I love you, Grandpa Jack. Love you.